Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to It Says What, where JW3 and Limud come together to bring you unexpected Jewish content from across the Jewish community every week before Shabbat. I'm Joe Hyman, JW3's young adult programmer, and if you haven't seen us, JW3 is the UK's Jewish Community and Arts Centre. We're partnering to bring you this content with Limud, a diverse and inclusive worldwide community of Jewish learning. Our building is currently closed, but JW3 is a project, not just a building. And we've been offering a huge range of broad programs over the course of the past few months in lockdown. And please check out our website to see what we're doing there. We're really excited to bring you educators, artists, and leaders from across the Jewish community in the UK and abroad to share a surprising piece of Jewish wisdom for our time. To ask your own questions, please comment on our live feed on YouTube and Facebook, and we'll take some towards the end. I am delighted to welcome Rabbi Isaiah Rothstein, who serves as a rabbinic scholar and public affairs advisor for Jewish Federations of North America. Currently living in Harlem, Isaiah was raised in the Jewish community of Monsey, New York, to a mixed-race Orthodox family and is passionate about creating a world where civil liberties and human rights are for all people. As a community scholar and advisor, Isaiah has supported Jewish communities in being deeply rooted in tradition, while also engaged in the cosmopolitan issues of our generation. It seems that we're quite similar, Isaiah. As a Jew of color and spiritual leader, songwriter, and musician, Isaiah believes in the power of song to bring healing into the world. Isaiah was also recently named one of New York's Jewish Week's 36 under 36. And for all those out there who care about my social life, recently I saw Isaiah perform in his incredible band. Is it Zaya? Is that how I say it? Zaya. And I highly recommend you checking out his YouTube channel as well. So welcome, Isaiah. Tell us, how are you and where are you at the moment?
Oh, wow, Joe. Thank you for that introduction. Thank you for having me. It's such a special opportunity to be joining with you. I'm currently in Harlem. I'm in New York City. And the sun is just a few hours up. And it's such a beautiful opportunity as we go into Shabbat, as we begin this weekend, to start my day and to end this week with learning Torah with you. So I just appreciate you inviting me to join you.
I'm so
Yeah.
glad that you could join us. So Isaiah, tell us, what is this text that has made you say, it says what?
Uh, it says what? It's so fun. It's actually beautiful. I love that because, when we learn Torah, to have that excitement and awareness to even realize that in many ways, people think of the Torah as this archaic, ancient thing of the past, its relevance to now. And sometimes we read things and we're like, wait, what? It says what? So I just want to say thank you again. And I also want to say that from how I was raised, specifically my background growing up in the Orthodox community of Muncie, New York, and hearing many, many, many rabbis of all different Orthodox hairstyles and clothes and dynamics, hearing many different rabbis speak Torah. It's so interesting what kind of Torah tropes, what kind of things you end up hearing, and what ends up being the primary voice of what you're learning. When you hear a rabbi giving a drasha and they focus on a specific list of things, you as a child can inherit an idea that certain ideas of Judaism are more important than other ideas of Judaism. And it's in many ways, I think, creating opportunities for learning Torah and text together and thinking about how it relates to this moment. We know that the Torah is vast. We know that we can continue to learn it. This idea of hafachba ve'hafachba dechulaba, right? As the rabbis say, that we can turn it because everything is in it, right? There's so much that we could learn. And so this idea of saying, it says what? I really love that because it's a reminder of the freshness. It's a reminder of the relevance. It's a reminder of what we can learn. And for me, growing up mixed race, I didn't really hear enough like texts around diversity. I didn't hear many texts around the humanism of Judaism per se, or the humanity of Judaism, and this idea of that we really are trying to unite and create and build a world from love. And yes, I've heard this idea from my namesake Prophet Isaiah to be a light unto the nations and Orla Goyim, but I wasn't given action steps of what that looked like. And so text it's such a profound thing, because where are those texts? Where are our texts that highlight this moment around human rights? As I engage specifically from where I'm seated, from my story, from my background, in trying to consider how we create a world that's more racially equitable, and where we try to create a world truly where nobody and nothing is left out, especially because of the color of their skin. I think about specifically for myself, like, how do I use my tradition to bring me to this conversation? How am I utilizing both the texts and the stories of the Jewish tradition to recognize that we are truly, for thousands of years, we've been holding this tradition of standing up for those who in need, those who are oppressed. Anyway, so this text for me, why I chose it, because it's the Adam and Eve text in many ways. It's a text around the first humans, right? According to our Jewish tradition, we know that the Torah says that humans, before Judaism, before the Torah, right? Humans were created b'tselem Elokim. All humans, all of us, all humans, all of us. Not some of us are not. Some of us aren't 3/5 of a human, a 3/5 of an Adam, or a 3/5 of an Eve. No, all of us. We were created in the image of God. Period. Great. We started with that. Whoa, right? And we also know that we come from a godly place. Like, that's what this origin story of the Torah, when it talks about Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. And we also know that we were given godly responsibility, right? We were given this idea that we were created by God to have a nishmat chaim, a ruach chaim, this idea that we have something different. We have language, this idea that we were given responsibility to name the animals. If you recall, Vayave el Adam liros ma yikra lo, right? God took Adam and Eve and they named the animals, and they were given this godly responsibility, right? There's a midrash that says in Kohelet Rabbah that God took Adam and Eve throughout the whole world and showed them the world, and says, Tein da'atcha, you should pay attention that you not destroy the world, right? You are in charge of this world. You, humanity, have been given a responsibility to support this, and what we see from our Torah, to support the stranger, the widow, the oppressed, to look out for those in need, specifically in every single generation. Chok olam l'dorosam, as many of our traditional Jewish laws say, it's a law that is perpetual for every generation. So with that, I chose this text because, to me, Shabbos, this idea of Shabbat as we go into Shabbat, is also is a reminder of complete equity. It's a reminder that we are all, it's horizontal. It's horizontal. No, the vertical structures, the hierarchies that exist in the world, for Shabbat, for Shemitah, for different parts of our identities, for the Yovel cycle, anything of 7, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, it's meant that we're horizontal. It's a reminder that we need to live in our lives as horizontal beings, recognizing that even though, yes, we are different, truly, but we're also we're equal. And I think, in many ways, the fight for racial justice in America today, it's not fighting for revenge from systemic racism and slavery in America. It's fighting for equality. Anyway, so let's jump in. Tanu Rabbanan, Adam Yechidi Nivra, Umipnei Ma. Tanu Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Adam was created alone. But for what reason? Why was Adam created alone? And the rabbis respond by saying, Shaloyu aminim omrin harbe rishiyot b'shamayim davar echad mipnei tzadikim mipnei arashayim. So what do the rabbis say? So that there aren't those who are rebellious or push back or are heretics, maybe is the word that at least this translation has. And they won't say that, there are many different kind of voices in heaven, and each created a different person, right? But maybe really another alternative answer, right, might be there, is that Adam was created alone due to the righteous and due to the wicked. So even we already see that there people might push back against hierarchical structures and say, there are many authorities in heaven, right? There are other people, there are other voices, or there are other energies or spirits that have force. But why was Adam created alone? So that people wouldn't say that, essentially. Alternatively, Adam was created alone due to the righteous and due to the wicked. That's an interesting line. And another reason, Shalo yayu at tzadikim omrim anu b'nei tzadik v'rasham omrim anu b'nei rasha. Another crazy answer. Why does the Torah start with Adam and Eve, and why is our whole legacy of not only Judaism but our humanity, the Torah, this biblical narrative that has truly been expansive for not only the Jewish people, but for humanity, in recognizing that we start with this origin story of Adam and Chava. Why? It's so that the righteous will not say, we are the children of the righteous and you are the children of the wicked, right? Anu b'nei tzaddik, v'rishayim omrim, anu b'nei rasha, right? We don't want anyone to say, right, anyone to feel like, oh, yeah, your story is really cool. Like, you have a really cool background. Like, oh, my story, I've got nothing. Like, yeah, oh no, like for me, both sides of my family come from Poland, like, and no, but your story is really interesting. And I'm like, what do you mean? We come from the same place. Why are you forgetting about that? And we forget. We know we forget, friends. So another brisa, another text in the Gemara. It says, right, what, again, continuing this question of Mipnei Ma Adam Yechidi Nivra. Why was Adam and Chava? Why were they created first? Why were the first forces? And it says, right, so that families wouldn't fight. Mishpachot shaloy mishpachot mitragot garot zu bezu, so that they won't get into quarrel. They won't get into arguments with each other. They won't get into a place of argument, I guess is just the best way to say it, for who has a stronger yichus, again, this is a real thing in many communities, what your background is, where you're from, ethnicity. It's true. Like, there's something we have to honor that's sacred about where we come from. We have to honor that and that we should also honor that sometimes who we bring home and what our family is and what our backgrounds are. We want to be sensitive. There's other sentences in the Talmud that talk about how, two people shouldn't marry if they're from different cities. What does that mean though? Sometimes it's hard to, when you feel like there's parts of your identity that don't overlap, you want to have that relationship with people you're intimate with, and it's true. But once we start looking at other people and we start discriminating because we say, your background is not my background, and I can't really talk to you because you come from a different place. Like, this source, it's coming straight from the Talmud, friends. It's coming from a primary source of Judaism. This source is basically saying so nobody feels bad about their background, right? So nobody says, I come from a bad background. So no, we all come from Adam. We all come from Chava. We all come from this one source, this one place. So, as we just continue this text, I think that we'll see that there's multiple answers that the rabbis provide. And I think what's fascinating is that they provide many answers to this question: why were humans created as Adam and Chava first? Right? It's ultimately to show that we want to mitigate any form of fighting that comes into place. Right? We want to, the last statements. Right? Why are the other reasons, right, that Adam and Eve were created first? It's to show us, right, again, to Mipnei HaGazlanim is another source from the Talmud, right, saying because we don't want people to think that they have power over each other to steal or to take by force for some reason that they maybe feel like they have an ability. Oh, guess what? Your ancestors were created in whatever BCE or however many, whatever day, but mine were created like even a little bit further. So therefore, I'm actually I have a right to overpower you. And we know that actually that psychology, that seems a little what? Like, how could that be? Like, how is that even a thing? We know that that in many ways that psychology is real, because how could the African slave trade have happened, right? With knowledge of this. I think from the side of the Jewish tradition, we have things like Yovel and Shemitah, which again remind us of this source, this horizontal relation. Shabbat reminds us of this source. Ata uvincha v'tacha avdecha v'amatcha v'amtecha v'gercha Hashem b'sharecha. Everyone, even your animals, everything, right? This idea of equity, we're all created from God, and what that's trying to show, and what God says, by the way, when people want to be enslaved, when humans somehow they either opt into slavery or they're forced into slavery because of a debt or because of whatever reason, God says, Avadahim, they're my servants. No one's supposed to be enslaved to anyone. No, you think that because you might live in X town or might have X amount of money, that you have control over the narrative for everyone else. No, you come from the same place. We all, again, what I started with, that we all have the same obligation as humans, to stand up for one another, and to recognize that as this source, in many ways says, like, no two people were created the same, but at the same time, we all come from one place. We come from one place, and the reminder of coming from one place, I think, is a reminder of our human rights, and the reminder of our humanity in this moment. I think that so much of our fighting is we get caught up in what, at least in America, we call like identity politics and intersectionality, and what identities you hold and what privilege you have, and all these things that honestly stop us. They stop us from remembering what we really are doing, and what we're really going for. And what we are is that we're B'Tselem Elokim Nivra'u, so Zachor Nekeva Bara'u Tam, right? We are created in the image of God, and we've been given godly responsibilities to steward the world, to build the world from love, to protect the world. And as we learn this text, as we go into Shabbat, as we think just about like where we might be seated right now and where we might be listening from, each of us have a role in reminding the world of this essential teaching from the rabbis today that we're learning, but then frankly, just this idea of B'Tselem Elokim, and that we all share the same ancestors, and that the rabbis even ask, why do we share the same ancestors? Is to make sure that we're creating peace and shalom in the world. So l'chaim.
Thank you so much, Isaiah. Sorry, the English pronunciation would be Isaiah, but I think we discussed this before. It's complicated for me. But Isaiah, first of all, thank you. Thank you for speaking from both your experience, but also through the lens of Torah at this time. It takes energy, and it takes a lot of energy and a lot of emotional space to speak about this issue right now, and what's going on in the world, and also bring it into how you look at the world through the lens of Torah. I think it's so important and so valuable. So thank you. I want to jump in to a conversation about this text. I mean, it is a kind of it says what text, in the sense that, does the Torah speak about racism and equity? Yes, it does. But people wouldn't necessarily think that, because there's so much conversation about chosenness. The first thing I want to ask you and kind of say is, we often in the Jewish community speak about chosenness. We speak about, we came first. Our story was first. It starts at creation. It doesn't start with a response to a different religion, or it doesn't start at a different point in time. We always speak about that. I know in the UK community, my experience has been like that. So I'm asking you, this text, it comes to me at least to say, actually, that's not why we start at the beginning. It's to come to say this point that you just made. Do you feel like this is an answer to that issue that's so prominent in our community of we came first?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. I would say that, this idea of chosenness in the Jewish community, this idea of homogeneity, this idea of being a part of a united collective legacy, I think has been essential to our survival in many ways, recognizing, and also essential to the modern world and to democracy as a whole. I think that, I personally, as a mixed race Jew, as having family who are not Jewish, I've never been able to swallow that Jewish particularism idea. It just never really worked for me, and I had sidewalks as a little kid. I was raised pretty religious, and it just never really landed with me. Where it does land with me, though, is that if we're chosen, what are we chosen for? And if we're chosen, are other nations chosen? And if they're chosen, what are they chosen for? And like that to me is like the way I want to approach that idea of chosenness, just personally, because I think what it reminds us is, yes, and the rabbis do talk about this. Like there's midrash, there's in Esther Rabbah, one of the midrashim. It goes through like all the nations of the world and what their voices are, and it like mentions all these ancient nations that like are like, what's that? But it essentially like says like each nation does have a voice, a legacy, something to add. And in many ways, yes, the West is built on the Magna Carta, on the Ten Commandments, on Mosaic law. I mean, philo-Semitic ideas. Like, we're in that way we've been very helpful to the development of society as a Jewish people. On the other hand, to your question of like, what happens when we become so blind to our history and to recognizing that chosenness doesn't mean that, number one, this text, right? It doesn't mean that we were the first. Chosenness means maybe a responsibility to be a light unto the nations. In terms of how like I think narratives and perspectives is constantly the key voice, because we know that the line of Jewish heritage and the Jewish tradition, we have so many sages, so many rabbis, we have hundreds of thousands of pages of literature that have been written throughout Jewish history. And guess what? Each of them were written by different people, and those people had different contexts, and they're coming from different places. And it's what I think we need to recognize is what is happening when our rabbis and our spiritual leaders are quoting specific ideas of Judaism that are specifically related to where they are and what they're thinking of for their communities. Yes, but how are they reminding us that Judaism is actually an exceptional religion that is not meant to be a religion. It's meant to be a way of life for like humanity. I know that might be controversial for some people, but like religion in like the pure sense of what religion means, it means to relegate, it means to control, and it's true that there are rules but the idea of Sinai was meant to be for the world. Like it's meant to shift the world consciousness. And there's so much of that in Judaism. Jewish history is a long and scary history and horrific history. On my father's side of the family, they fled Russian pogroms, in the late early 1900s, and the Jewish people's history, especially like in the middle, like the earth, let's say the medieval period, past medieval to Middle Ages to pre-enlightenment to enlightenment, like the 1800s, 1850s. Oh my gosh, like if you learn your Jewish history, oh my gosh, like, and I think the chosenness thing in this generation particularly and last generation doesn't really hold the same way. And the reason why I would say that is because the idea of chosenness and protecting our chosenness, I think we still hold. And I think, and what I mean by that is that we see a legacy that we're holding. But I think that the average person produced in America, at least in this generation, recognizes that we're in, Mashiach is only going to come with every single nation working together. And like, we're one very important voice as a Jewish community, but there are other important voices, and our role in supporting them, and again, Joe, I don't know if I like fully even answered what you asked, but I think that I think this issue of chosenness and this idea of homogeneity and looking at Judaism as a monolith and like all these things are really functions of like migration and war and trauma and displacement. And like, there's a lot there that we should talk about, but we might not get to it today,
Thank you. I I think you did respond to the question, and I think so much more as well. I think it's really interesting to look at Judaism not as a monolith, especially in this moment. We so often do, and the point that you made about growing up and not seeing people like you teach, not seeing people like you as in the kind of rabbinate is so vital for so many different groups, and specifically people of color and for Black Jews, and that idea of kind of what you see as what you inherit. And
Mm-hmm.
I think uncovering that kind of that piece that shows actually no, there's complexity in here. There's lots of different people speaking
Yeah.
of different colors throughout the Torah. We have a question from the audience which I want to share with you. Um,
Hi,
um,
audience.
It's from Ezra Margulies, and it's about that notion of chosenness, but how how do you personally deal with the notion of equal rights when it comes within the Torah, when it comes to the conception of Kohanim, Leviim, women, the hierarchy within the Torah? This comes to serve that point, but there's complex, different views in the Torah, and how do you manage when it does not fit with that frame?
Yes, love that question. Bombshell question. Also needs a good hour, two, three. Um, I'll say specifically, like when it comes to hierarchies, right? Humans were created with both. We were the only species that, I think Aviva Zornberg, she's a commentary on the Torah, really incredible. I think she writes this, that like humans were the first to be horizontal and vertical. She quotes a lot of incredible text there, but essentially that we were given both the responsibility to like be like literally eye to eye, like even remembering that the first human was created both male and female, like, and this idea that gender was even supposed to be like the original human, right? It was fluid in a way, like we see in the first human in a unique way, but we see that. So there was horizontal, like let us be equal for real, and then we were also vertical, and God was nervous. The angels were nervous. You're going to make humans vertical. They're going to think they're God, they're going to think that they control the scene. And so, but with that said, we were given a responsibility to temper and to recognize the balance of power and hierarchies and systems. And, in terms of texts in the Torah that are directly for our times seen as like absolutely inhumane, things we wouldn't do, like the wars that are fought in the Torah, like we wouldn't, even if the Rambam has like, there's definitely laws in place that of how we could fight in war, and there's the Gemara, like there's things to be said, but I think that even today many things, like the classic example of the wayward child, right? The rabbis immediately write in the Talmud, guess what? This has never been observed. Like Shemitah and Yovel, like there are questions also. I mean, this is a little bit more controversial, but there are people who are like, wait, like, okay, we know this exists in the tradition, but it hasn't been observed, right? And there's like questions of like, so I think specifically through the friends of the frame of our generation, I guess I'll just start with gender, because I think that it's in terms of like the Jewish traditional lens, like the logic for Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael is like a whole other landscape of I guess responsibilities and roles than, let's say, the conversation specifically around women or children for that matter. And then from there to like servants, slaves, and the different hierarchies that exist in the Torah, which are like, yeah, it's like, whoa, today, like, is that how we would interpret these ideas and how we use them? And we know that the Rashi, Ramban, several other rabbis say that many things in the Torah we can't theoretically use literally as we could look at as in theory, but in practice it looks very different. Most halacha, most Jewish laws, there's a reason why there's a Talmud, right? Because what the Tanakh, what the Old Testament, what Jewish scripture really writes, in many ways, how it actually plays out, it looks in many cases very different. With that said, are there power dynamics or hierarchies or showing lack of power for certain different demographics within the Torah and Tanakh? Absolutely. When it comes and I think there's a lot to say there about, like, again, when it comes to at least through the Jewish traditional lens of thousands of years of Jewish texts, like women's roles in Judaism, those questions are real. Specifically to the Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael, I'll share just like a piece from Rav Kook. Rav Kook has this idea on the Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael. We know that the whole idea of the priestly system was for the whole nation. It was not necessarily only for any one group or caste. We don't believe in a caste system. Caste means different levels of power. That's not what Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael truly represented. Once we learn, and I know that we're coming in for a close, so I'll say in just 60 seconds or less, but specifically the priestly code, right? Leviticus, this third book. It's there to represent somewhat of different parameters and boundaries that exist. And we know if everyone is welcome, no one's welcome. We know without any boundaries, right? You need a seashore. You need to know, like, what do you mean? Like, we don't want an ocean just flooding us. So boundaries are important. The question is, like, what kind of boundaries, and what are how are we set? Are they steel walls? Are they? And I think that the idea of the Kohanim and the Leviim, in terms of their representation for the nation, Rav Kook says is a kav hamavdil and the kav hamechaber. How do we see the Kohen, Levi, and Yisrael, right? These voices actually truly united in so many ways, and each of them, just how in racial justice, in the movement, right? Everyone is in different spots. Everyone has different roles and responsibility. Like I think the frame for Kohen, Levi, Yisrael is that we're like, and the priestly code of Leviticus is that we actually all embody the priestly voice. We're all called a Mamlecha Kohanim, a priestly nation. Anyway, so I think that conversations around equity, there are 1,000 holes in Jewish tradition of where we need to connect and speak to about how there are disconnects, maybe, especially as we relate to social equity in our generation versus how they maybe viewed social equity a few thousand years back.
Thank you. I think that's that's so real. I think adding voices that haven't been heard in these conversations is the way to do that, to see things in these texts and deal with those holes that make us uncomfortable, that not just make us uncomfortable, but hurt people and push people out of the community. One line that I want to focus on from this text, which I think is really a call to action, and I wanted to ask you what that call to action is, and maybe you can give me one line before we finish about that. But one thing that stood out to me is we are the children of the righteous, and righteousness is natural for us. There is no need for us to exert ourselves to be righteous. And the wicked will not say, we're the children of the wicked and cannot change our ways. What's clear to me in this one, it's about action. You can't just sit. You can't just say, I come from a good family. We're very kind. We look after, the people that we are around. We pay people proper wages, etc. We're not racist. We have to constantly be in that process of action and change. And I'm so glad that you brought this text, because this is what the people need to hear. This is what the Jewish community needs to hear right now, that we can't sit down. We have to be standing and walking and moving. So if just with one line, and I know that's a huge ask, but
especially for me,
especially for you, but what's the action? Maybe I can focus that in on what's the action for someone who's trying to engage through Judaism on these issues.
I think first and foremost is we have to contextualize our own story. We have to remember our common history. We have to know our own individual history. Second is, once we contextualize our own story, our own process, our own pain, we're able to actually put that next to somebody else's story and somebody else's pain and truly think about how we contextualize our voice. And then three, and I think this is the thing that is often the first and most important, is just we need to join the conversation. We need to recognize that everything that we're engaging in and struggling with, it starts with Adam and Eve. It starts with all of us, and we're united, and none of us can say that our background says, I have nothing to do with this. I didn't start this. I'm just inheriting this mess. No, we have an obligation to respond.
Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom, everyone who's watching.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and please tune in to It Says What next week. And we'll be releasing
It Says What?
our July schedule soon. I think Isaiah says It Says What far better than I do. So maybe I think he's so much more surprised. Anyway, Shabbat Shalom all.
Thank you, Joe.